The wind carried the scent of sawdust and pine resin through the clearing where Etta May Callahan stood alone, her shoulders squared against the weight of the axe she held. Each swing of the blade echoed like a stubborn prayer in the quiet of the Wyoming hills. The cabin was only a skeleton of timber now, ribs of raw pine stacked shoulder-high, but to Etta it was already sacred. Every log laid was a refusal, of pity, of dependence, of the life that had nearly chewed her up back east. She wore her independence like armor, frayed flannel sleeves rolled to the elbow, hair pinned messily beneath a wide-brimmed straw hat, skin bronzed from the sun she faced daily without complaint. Silas Boone first noticed her from the ridge above her land, a quiet silhouette in the valley below. He hadn't intended to stop. He was a man who kept to himself since the day he buried the woman who once filled his house with warmth and music. But something about the sight of Etta, small against the vastness, deliberate in every movement, held him there. He didn't ride down, didn't speak, just watched from the saddle, the brim of his hat casting a shadow over eyes that hadn't softened in years. The land around her claim was rough, untamed, the kind of place that tested a person's resolve. Most women would have come with a man or not at all. But Etta had arrived on a rented mule with nothing but a folded deed, a cast iron skillet, and a bundle of old tools tied with rope. Folks in town whispered before they even learned her name. Judith Wilkes, who ran the inn, was the first to say it aloud. A woman with that kind of grit must be running from something. And maybe she was. Etta ignored them. She hadn't come to make friends or answer questions. Her past was her own, as was the plot of land she'd worked 3 years to afford. She spent her days carving notches into fresh-cut beams and her nights huddled by a fire under the stars, the roofless cabin framing the heavens like a cathedral. She didn't miss the city. Not the noise, not the men with greedy eyes, not the jobs that left her aching and ashamed. Here, no one barged in. No one told her where to stand or how to smile. Here, every splinter in her hand felt like proof she still belonged to herself. Silas kept returning, always staying back, his horse shifting patiently beneath him. Some part of him told him to look away, to mind his own business. But another part, quieter, more stubborn, found comfort in her rhythm. She reminded him of the land itself, unyielding, beautiful in her scars, asking nothing and deserving more. One late afternoon, clouds gathered fast. Etta glanced skyward, read the signs like scripture, and moved quick to cover her tools. The wind picked up, tossing dust and pine needles across the clearing. Her tent, patched and fragile, flapped helplessly. Rain came in sideways sheets, the temperature dropping so fast her breath turned silver. She crouched beneath the eaves of her half-framed wall, clutching a wool blanket to her chest. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just stared into the dark trees, jaw tight, heart loud in her ears. Then the hoofbeats came. She knew who it was before she saw him. Silas approached with slow, deliberate movements, one arm wrapped around a bundle, dry wood and another blanket. He didn't speak. Just set them beside her without fanfare. Their eyes met briefly. His gaze wasn't pitying. It was steady, respectful, and then he turned and walked back into the storm. The fire burned warmer that night, and though her body still shivered, something inside her softened just a little. She folded his blanket in the morning, left it on the edge of her makeshift porch, and returned to work. Days passed. Each one painted with the same blend of sweat, silence, and stubborn will. Silas never asked her name, never intruded, but his visits continued in quiet ways. A bag of nails left beside her stack of planks, a hammer with a smoother handle than her own, a small tin of coffee placed just far enough from the cabin not to startle her. She never thanked him out loud. He never lingered for thanks, but a wordless language took root between them. Gesture for gesture, silence for silence. It felt like something old and sacred, like water drawn slowly from a deep well. Still, the town didn't miss a beat. Judith Wilkes watched everything from the window of her inn. Saw Silas buy extra supplies. Saw him ride north instead of west. Saw Etta's name written across every whispered suspicion. "She's not building a home," she said one afternoon, loud enough for the blacksmith to hear. "She's building a trap. And that poor man's stepping right into it." The words spread like wildfire, twisted with every retelling. The sheriff, Dal Colton, didn't say much. Just took it all in like dust on the wind. He'd seen men burn themselves chasing shadows, and women crucified just for trying to survive. Etta felt the stares when she came to town for nails or flour. She heard the hush that fell behind her back. But she never flinched, didn't run. Shame was a coat she'd already worn, and it no longer fit. Silas wasn't immune either. He heard the talk. A widower with too much time on his hands. A man clinging to a ghost by trying to fix something broken. But he said nothing. Not to them. Not even to himself. He just kept showing up. Watched her cabin rise log by log. Saw the bruises on her palms, the winces she hid when she lifted more than she should. Saw the set of her spine even when she faltered. One evening, as twilight painted the horizon in mauves and fire orange, Etta stood staring at the western wall of the cabin. It was the last stretch left to raise. Her arms trembled from the day's labor. Her breath came in short bursts. But she kept going. Silas stepped from the shadows. No words, just presence. She looked at him. Really looked. "You come here every day," she said, her voice hoarse from sawdust and silence. "But you never ask me why I'm doing this alone." His reply came after a pause. "You don't look like you need reminding." And for the first time, she smiled. Not wide. Not soft. But real. The wall went up that night. And Silas stayed longer than he ever had. Not to help. Just to sit. Just to be. The fire crackled between them, and in that moment, neither one of them was alone. Not quite. And though nothing was said, something had shifted. Something had begun. The days grew shorter as autumn crept in, bringing with it the kind of quiet only the wilderness could teach. Etta May's cabin stood taller now, complete save for a few details, a window shutter, a stovepipe, a proper door latch. She moved through the space like a woman who'd won a war, but not without cost. Her knuckles were raw, her back stiff from weeks of bending and hauling. Yet, in her eyes burned the steady light of someone who had reclaimed what was stolen, her place in the world. Silas Boone hadn't said much in all the weeks he'd wandered toward her land. But that night, after the last beam was nailed and the roof stopped leaking moonlight, he brought her a tin box, flat and rusted, the lid barely holding shut. He didn't offer explanation. Just placed it on the smooth pine counter she'd fashioned from a salvaged wagon plank and nodded. Inside were simple things. A pocket knife, 2 spools of thread, a carving of a horse worn smooth by years of being handled. Etta lifted it in her palm, feeling the story etched into its surface. "Yours?" she asked, her voice soft but certain. He shook his head once. "Hers." They sat across from one another that evening, knees nearly touching. She offered him stew, thick, peppered, made from rabbit and potatoes. He ate slowly, eyes on the fire, until she finally asked, "What was her name?" "Clara," he answered. She liked violet. Used to say they were the only thing brave enough to bloom in the wind. Etta nodded, lips pressing into a thin line. She didn't pry further. Loss had a way of hardening behind silence. She knew that all too well. There was something different about the way they looked at each other now. Not love, not yet, but the raw beginnings of understanding. No declarations. Just proximity and warmth. A shared rhythm. But comfort breeds envy. When Etta returned to town the next morning for nails and lamp oil, she found the air heavy with pointed stares. Judith Wilkes stood outside the inn, arms crossed, lips pressed into a permanent smirk. "You'll want to speak with Sheriff Colton," she said, feigning concern that didn't reach her eyes. "He's got questions about your land papers. Seems someone spotted a different name on that deed." Etta didn't flinch. Didn't show the spike of dread that knotted in her gut. She nodded once and made her way to the sheriff's office, boots striking hard against the dusty road. Sheriff Colton was a slow man, not unkind, but deliberate in his silences. He read the copy of her deed through narrowed eyes, then folded it neatly and set it on the desk. "Someone's been stirring the pot," he said, not naming names. "A banker out of Cheyenne's been sending telegrams. Might be worth proving your claims clean." "I bought it fair," she said. "From a man who didn't care if I was a woman or a ghost." "I believe you," the sheriff replied. "But belief don't count for much with ink and stamps." She left without another word, the weight of uncertainty pressing like ice against her chest. If the land wasn't hers, then everything she'd built, every log, every night spent shivering beneath the stars, could vanish on someone else's word. Silas found her that evening chopping kindling, her strikes sharp, breath ragged. He didn't speak until she stopped, sweat lining her brow despite the chill. "Trouble," she exhaled through clenched teeth. "They want to take it. The papers. They think I forged them." He leaned against the frame of the cabin, arms crossed. "What'll you do?" She dropped the axe. "Fight. I didn't build this place just to watch someone else claim it." He stepped closer. "Not a comfort, not a rescue, just a presence. Then I'll fight beside you." It was the closest thing to a vow she'd ever heard from a man. Word spread faster than wildfire. By the week's end, half the town had picked a side. Judith was the loudest. "He's just lonely," she hissed to anyone who'd listen. "Lost his wife, and now clinging to the first pair of strong arms that wandered in." Others nodded, eager to tear down what they didn't understand. The sheriff kept quiet, waiting, watching. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. An official seal. Ink that bled a little in the corners. Etta stood with Silas on her porch as she read it, hands trembling slightly. Then a slow, disbelieving breath escaped her lips. "It's valid," she said. "It's mine." Relief didn't come in a wave. It came in silence. Silas's hand found her shoulder, and they stood like that for a long moment, two people stitched together by the sharp thread of survival. But Judith didn't take the news quietly. That same night, someone set fire to Etta's supply shed. The blaze lit up the night like a funeral pyre, smoke curling into the stars. Etta and Silas ran into the cold with buckets, flinging water until dawn. The shed was gone, but the cabin stood unharmed. Etta stood before the ash heap as the morning sun rose, arms crossed, jaw set. "They want to break me," she whispered. "Want me to run." "You're not running," Silas said, voice like gravel. "Not anymore." Later that day, she returned to town. Walked into Judith's inn and placed the deed, real and legal, on the table. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "And you don't scare me." Judith didn't answer. Didn't need to. The room had gone quiet, and silence was a kind of surrender. That night, Etta cooked 2 cups of stew. Set the tin carving of the horse on the mantel beside the fire. Silas sat in the rocking chair she'd built from leftover beams. No music played. No candle flickered. Just the sound of 2 people breathing in the same space. The wind howled against the cabin walls like a memory trying to get in. But the walls held. The roof did not leak. And outside, the land no longer felt like a test, it felt like home. Silas lifted his cup. "To stubborn things," he said. Etta clinked hers against his. "To the ones who keep building, even when no one believes in the blueprint." Outside the window, snow began to fall, soft, steady, forgiving. It gathered on the roof like a benediction, sealing the past beneath white silence. And inside, by the fire, something bloomed between them. Unspoken, unrushed, but very, very real.